So our third speaker for the morning on the topic of is collaboration the new innovation is Mike Conlon. And Mike is the Vivo project director at Durospace. Vivo is an open source software and ontology for representing scholars and scholarly works. Institutions use Vivo for expert finding, team building, program evaluation, and social network analysis. Mike earned his PhD degree in statistics from the University of Florida, is the author of more than 200 scholarly publications and presentations, and has been an investigator on more than $120 million in grant-funded research in biomedicine. His current interests include enterprise change, information representation, the semantic web, and techno-social issues in research data sharing. Mike.
Thank you, Alan Press and Tim, for having me here, and thank you. I'm a researcher. Right? I just recently retired from the University of Florida after what felt like a really long career. The world of research changed significantly over my tenure there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research climate, kind of as a lead-in to why the kind of things that we've been talking about this morning are important to researchers. So I hope we're all in the business of facilitating scholarship and research. And just a bit of a disclaimer, I will tend to use the terms research, scholarship, and even science kind of interchangeably, and please excuse me for that. My background was in biomedicine. I spent a significant amount of time in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. My home department is statistics. My home professional society is the American Statistical Association. And I spent a fair amount of time in the dean's office, actually, as an assistant dean there in liberal arts and sciences, becoming familiar with the humanities and social sciences and the other parts of the university. But in science, we're going to talk a little bit about 5 big things that are changing everything for scientists. The first is molecular science. So that's Francis Collins. He works here down the street at the NIH. And he gives out $35 billion worth of research dollars every year. And he's a molecular scientist. Molecular science is changing everything because it produces incredible new demands on the scientific infrastructure. We heard about the public utilities of scholarship. That's a great idea. A great way to think about it. There's the infrastructure of science. So we have cell sorters and gene sequencers and laboratories. And when you take an aerial view of our health center, you might have thought that what was in the health center were patients or students or faculty. What's really in the health center are laboratories. It's about 70% of the area, the land mass, is laboratories. And our health center is approximately 6 million square feet. So that's a lot of labs. And we're just one research university. So molecular science is really changing everything. Now, the demands of molecular science and publishing is really about data. The article doesn't tell us that much. The data is the story. So we need the sequences of everything that got produced. And we're going to tell you about it in the paper. But to learn about it, you're going to have the data. And so the ability for the publishing infrastructure to represent science in some reasonable way is going to require this opening of the publishing process, as we are experiencing through processes that will go beyond the published article. The second trend, the increasing complexity of scientific problems. This is one of our oncologists. He's explaining to parents what has happened in a trial. So we are putting children in clinical trials. because we want to cure children's cancer. And that is a hard job in every way. And so this complexity is growing. And so we have our oversight committees, our institutional review boards, our infrastructure for science, and we have a social infrastructure for science in which we are attempting to communicate what we are doing. And we're not doing a very good job because people don't think climate change is real. So there's something about what we're doing as scientists that is failing the public. We're dealing with very complex problems, and we would like people to understand that. So the increasing complexity of the problems is just a feature of our work. Obviously, we have big data. Okay? I'm a techno guy. Okay? I took a turn as Chief Information Officer of our health center, okay, dealing with the data structures and volume and flow. I'm on the research computing committee at the university. Now we have petabytes, soon we'll have exabytes. So we just keep going. Okay? And of course we have the security issues that come with it, and of course we have the demands. I was going to say the demands of the millennials, but there are expectations that things work. Okay? So things are supposed to work. Okay? So you put all this data somewhere, you're supposed to get it. You're supposed to be able to reuse it. So this is not our data center, but our data center looks just like that. Okay? So we graduated from my data was on a USB to my data is something like that. Okay? So that's a big change for researchers and for the university system. Yeah, I'm speechless. So the internet impact on science, well, we could talk for months about that, right? So we built this internet thing, and scientists built it, right? We all know, that was a grant-funded research project in DARPA. They decided, hey, look at us, we can put bytes on a wire and send it to somebody else, and they could read it. And that seemed like a good idea. So it got a little bigger than that. We're still trying to understand, and we will be trying to understand it for years to come, what it means to have more timely access to the work of science. So, I can remember getting reprint requests, for my papers. And I would go, open up my file drawer and get out a copy of my paper and go down to the Xerox machine and put an envelope and send it to somebody. Okay? Now people know about science in split seconds. Okay? And people are tweeting out the results of things. I'm involved in data sharing and involved in helping the faculty, become data sharers and understand the impact of the internet on science, and it is surprising. They don't. On the one hand, there's a lot of change going on, and generational change. But on the other hand, they don't call it the ivory tower for nothing. There are people who are isolated from some of this, and they're still doing things in surprising ways. We have the open access movement. We have mandated data sharing. We have all kinds of things going on. But I don't think we know what the impact is. I do know that the laboratory scientists that I work with, I was talking about posting presentations. So this presentation is posted and it's on Figshare and it has a DOI, and I did that before I got here. And, that's just normal for me, to share presentations and work. I mentioned that to one of my lab scientist friends, and I thought he was going to just keel over. He's like, I have my, my intellectual property is in those slides, and, that's my work, and I could be scooped, and if I put that stuff in a public place, that'd be the end of my career, So there's an interesting dynamic going on in science around the internet, and a big love-hate relationship, I think. So the notion of communicating results before they are results, of communicating findings before they're findings. I don't think we know what the impact is. And then the trend of collaboration and team science. I missed this group photo. I don't know why. I should have been in this picture. This is the group at the University of Florida that is the personalized medicine group. And so this group successfully managed to get a grant and take pharmacogenomic findings and create a change in the laboratory practices of the hospitals at the University of Florida, so that if you are getting a catheter, a heart catheter, we can ask you if you would like to be sequenced so that we can know the SNPs in your genome that might affect your ability to accommodate or process or metabolize a particular medication that we're going to give you for anti-clotting. So after you have the catheter, we're going to give you a drug. And we know that 40% of you are carrying a genomic variation that will prevent that drug from working. 40% of you are carrying a genome that will prevent that drug from working. And so we thought we were giving you a medication that would be an anti-clotter, but it isn't. And unless we sequence you, we wouldn't know. So we were able to get some money, get some gene sequencers, convince people at the hospital, introduce a new workflow, and make information move from the physician who's telling the patient, this is an important thing, to the patient agreeing to having the sequencing, to getting the data, to putting it in the medical record, to alerting the physician. Okay? A full cycle of data. Okay? That took teamwork. Okay? A lot of teamwork. So there were physicians, and there were pharmacologists, and there were informaticians, and there were lab guys, and there were trainees and trainers who were working with the clinics. There was the institutional review board. There was the management of the hospital. There was all of that. And this project took 8 months. Okay? So from the time we thought of this idea to the time that patients were actually being gene sequenced for the purpose of making a guided decision about their drug therapy, about 8 months, okay? Which is pretty good. Okay, so a lot of different people involved. We actually had we had five different information technology teams. The pathology lab, the electronic medical record people, just all over the place. Big collaborative effort, very difficult. Okay. That's the kind of science we're trying to do. Okay? That's called translational science, where you actually take a finding and translate it into practice and actually try to help somebody. Okay? As opposed to do some science and write a paper and and go on to the next paper. Okay? In translational science, we actually try to take the scientific result, push it into some kind of scientific practice. So those are some big changes that are going on in the environment. In the scientific environment. What does that mean for, so how do we respond to those things? What do we do about it? Okay. Well, we're scientists, so what do? We study it. Okay? So we study how it works. Okay? So this is one of my colleagues, Toddy Warner, at Indiana University. And she's a laboratory information scientist and visualization expert. And so she had created by hand, there was no software to do this, she created by hand a visualization of her principal investigator network. These are people that she is co-funded with. Okay? And so the color scheme has to do with the age of the association. The size has to do with the number of dollars. And then she's got people's names and faces on there, so we can quickly see who and how she's associated with a variety of different people. Okay? So she showed me this in 2000. She made this in 2006 or 7. She showed it to me in 2009. It's 2016. I can almost make this diagram, with a computer. Okay, because I almost have the data I need to do what we see on the screen. Okay, and it's important because it gives her an idea, and it gives people around her an idea. In this case, where the money is, okay, and where the money came from. I'm involved with a project called Vivo that we heard about, which assembles information about research and focuses it on the researchers. So we're assembling information from ORCID, from Crossref, from the institution, from the researcher about what happened and who did it. Okay? And understanding, well, first, thank you for the identifiers. Without identifiers, this work is impossible. Okay? Because names are not specific enough. They're just not specific enough. Okay? University of Florida has 6,000 faculty members. 6,000. We have 5 J. Johnsons. Okay. We have 3 Julie Johnsons. We only have 1 Julie A. Johnson. Okay? So if we got all that right, maybe we could identify her by name. She happens to be the person standing in the middle of this figure. Julie A. Johnson is the woman right in the middle of the figure. She's the dean of our College of Medicine, and she is a member of the Institute of Medicine, which is one of the highest honors for a biomedical scientist in the country. And she writes guidelines on the use of genomic information for pharmaceutical management. Okay? But we wouldn't know that the paper belonged to her because it just says J. Johnson. Okay? So we need an identifier that says this number, this person has this number, and then we can know, oh, it's that J. Johnson. Okay? So it's actually quite a simple idea. Okay? We also want numbers for other things. So at the bottom you see research areas for me, and you see the notation FAST. That's a terminology that was created by the OCLC, and the terminology has approximately 500,000 terms, and those terms are advertised to be sufficient for representing scholarship at some level, and they have a little bit of hierarchical structure so that if somebody says they study cardiology, we would know that that's medicine. And if somebody says they study hypertension, we might know that's cardiology. Okay, so knowing the terminology and knowing it with some precision is also important, so that faculty members can find each other and researchers can find each other. And you can go, oh, that's a person who works on the semantic web. Okay? And they didn't mistype it. They didn't, again, they didn't, we had a bad experience. We had an open text field and we asked faculty members, what is your research area? And they would, half of them cut and pasted in pages from their thesis. So it just doesn't work. You have to actually, clarify things a little bit. So getting terminology and precision around these things is very, very important. Okay? When you have that kind of data, then you can make various kinds of visualizations. This is a visualization from Vivo about my academic record and the areas that I publish in. And so you see I had something to do with health professions, something to do with social sciences, and something over in the brain area. And that's true. I spent 10 years on a collaborative research project involving studying the impact of cocaine on pregnancy and birth outcomes and developmental outcomes of children whose mothers used cocaine during their pregnancy. Okay? And so I studied that problem for about 10 years in a long-term collaboration. You can make co-author networks, so these are people I publish with. So with me, you can see the connections I have with various people, and you can see the strengths of those connections and how often I publish with various people in the environment. And then you can take the data and use it at larger levels. So our social network analysis group at the University of Florida produced an analysis of collaboration at the university. So on the left, you see this is a co-funded network. So this is again where the money is. We're looking at connections between people, and these are individual researchers. So there's about 6,000 dots on that plot. Well, actually only the funded ones. So there's about 2,500 dots on the plot. And then they're color-coded for whether the person is in the health science center is blue, and red is the institute that I was the co-director of, the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, which is kind of a catalyst for biomedical research. And then green are people who are not affiliated in biomedical science or the health center. And so you see from 2008 to 2012 a kind of coalescing and a kind of increase in importance of the institute. So you see the affiliation with the institute was important in 2008, but it's actually quite central in 2012, and they're repeating this analysis in 2016. The academy moves slowly, so 4 years seems to be about the right amount of time to do that. So to study scholarship, we need open data about scholarship. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what we need. One thing we need is open, persistent identifiers, like ORCID. My university has not yet put ORCIDs on everybody because the faculty are waiting for the publishers. And I had my boss come in and ask me, hey, he's a gastroenterologist. So he's publishing an article in some gastroenterology journal. And he said, they're asking me for my ORCID. What is that? And he thought I might know, and I did know. And so I was able to explain to him in 25 words or less why knowing who did the work is important. Okay, and that it all comes down to that, right? Knowing who did the work. Okay? So open, persistent identifiers. Everything has an identifier. So there I am in a happy mood, and I have an identifier, and there it is. There's my ORCID person identifier. Okay, so things have identifiers. So there's my picture. You see me, and I have an identifier. Okay, and then I have a profile. Okay, in a computer system. That profile has an identifier. We're used to this on the internet, right? It has an internet address, right? So if you put that address into a computer, you would get that profile. Okay? So that profile is perfectly identified by that address. Okay? And notice that the ORCID is baked into that address. So we're basically asserting that profile belongs to the person who has that ORCID. Okay? So that's really nice. And then you see the kind of traditional thing over here, a reference. Okay, that's one of mine. Okay, detection of cocaine and its metabolites in breast milk. Okay, so which you can do, by the way. And then in the state of Florida, you would go to jail. There's a reference, but now the reference has an identifier, and I don't mean the paper. I mean the reference. Okay, has an identifier. Because we're going to build systems like you were talking about, and to build those kinds of systems, we're going to drag and drop those references around, okay? And we're going to put them in systems, and we're going to do that, they have to be identified, okay? What reference are we talking about? Not the one I just typed in. That's all messed up. That's old. We're not doing that anymore, okay? The reference, okay? The reference with an identifier, okay? So the reference has an identifier, okay? And look what we did there. That's got a PubMed ID in it. Okay? So it might be talking about a particular piece of work, which it is. Okay? And then there's the work. Okay? So there's the work. It's a PDF. Okay? This detection of cocaine and metabolites is great. And it has a PubMed ID. Okay? So each step along the way, there's a thing, and there's a thing. The thing has an identifier. Okay? And this allows us to connect everything up and make systems. Okay? And also notice that this has a PubMed ID, but it does not have a DOI. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, so How'd that happen? Well, I guess because the Journal of Forensic Science in the year 2001 was not putting DOIs on its journal articles. Okay? So I know some journals have numbered backwards, which is a good thing because then scholarship is numbered and we can assemble it, and some have. Okay? But in this case, we were able to find an identifier for this work in PubMed, but we were not able to find one through the DOI process. Okay? So things have identifiers, and when they have identifiers, we can get them all connected up. And then we can know who did what, and we can actually see the what. Okay? So we need persistent identifiers, and we sort of have a really good system for people. I don't have any issues with ORCID. I mean, that thing works. For me, that's a solved problem. All we need is for people to have ORCIDs. That's like the final frontier. So you have 2 million ORCIDs, and how many researchers are there in the world? About 10 million. Right. So that would have been, I would have had to guess something like that. So and that's worldwide. So that includes third world researchers. Does not include people working in industry. Right? Exactly. So who's going to have an ORCID, and how many ORCIDs are there going to be, and how far have we penetrated into the collection of researchers? These are kind of open problems. But the people thing looks like we're in a really good place. Journals, they have ISSN, that's pretty good. We work with ISSN.org. It seems to, that's a pretty good thing. Scholarly works, they have DOI, good. Hope they all have DOI. Can have DOI, that'd be good. Organizations, we're working on that. So there is ISNI. We want organizational identifiers because, I worked at the University of Florida. I was involved with university administration. I did things for the university and with the university as the university. Put it that way. So I represent the university as a assistant vice president, and the organizations need identifiers because we want to know who did the work, and then we want to know that work was done by one of our people. Okay? So it's very important that we can, and it's a little tedious to say, okay, well we know our people, there's 6,000 of them. What would be much better is to be able to say this work was done by someone and their affiliation is University of Florida, and not loose in the world, type open text box, but pick University of Florida. Okay? Not Florida State, not some other university that has the word Florida in its title. Okay, and by the way, if you've ever asked a faculty member what department they work in, they don't work. First, it's very collaborative now, so they might work in multiple departments. They get frustrated by your question. And second, depending on the name of the department, and we're moving things around pretty quickly. We have 145 academic departments. How many, do they get the words right? I'd put it's about a 70%er. So they say they work in the Department of Hepatology. There is no such thing. They work in the Division of Hepatology, which is the division of the Department of Medicine. Okay? So, it's a bad question for them. Okay? But they do know what university they work at. So there is an effort going on. OCLC will put out a report next month around the use of ISNI as an organizational identifier. The GRID identifier has been created by Digital Science and is open and CC BY and all that, and you can have the data. And we work with Digital Science on the GRID data, and from my perspective, it appears to be sufficient for the purpose. But we're in the early stages of organizational identifiers, I think. We need, and this seems like an advanced idea, but we'll get there. Common data models. So if I query the information infrastructure, the public utility of scholarship, and I query it and I say, give me the reference information for this DOI. Do I know what I'm going to get back? I should know what I'm going to get back. I should know I'm going to get 4 things, or 15 things, or 18 things, and I should know what those things are. Okay? And we're just not sort of there yet. We're sort of halfway there. We're getting there. We've got public APIs, and we're getting information, and I can query DOI and get information back. That's all really great, okay? But we're not actually down to the point where we have good expectations about what's going to come back from on the other side of the conversation. So when I say to a computer system, hey, here's a DOI, tell me what you know about this DOI, there's all kinds of things that can come back, okay? So we're busy, straightening this out. We need common data models so that we can connect things up. So when we think about the scientist and their work, we're thinking about connecting things like this. So there's the scientist, and the scientist might be the author of a paper, but the scientist also studies a particular concept, as we saw, the fast vocabulary in my profile. The scientist might be curating a particular set of data or responsible for it. The scientist is a team member of some project. The scientist has some funding. The scientist uses some resource. And the scientist is a keynote speaker at some event. Okay? That's the life of the scientist. Okay? And we want to be able to represent that. We want all of that to kind of flow through the pipes of information that we're building. Okay? So that we can come out the other end and say, oh, there's the scientist. Okay? There's the scholarly record. That's what's going on. Okay? That's what's happening. Okay? Some pieces of that we're very good at. Other pieces of that we're not very good at. Okay? Well, I think we're particularly good at. In terms of all of that, we're actually very, very good at scientist and paper. We're getting there. We have DOIs, we have open APIs, we have ORCID, we have ways of connecting the person to the work. Okay? And of course, I use the word paper. If I was at Force 11, where he just came from, I would have used work because they like all kinds of work. And so do scientists. So they may have made a paper, but they may have made a laboratory procedure, or built a machine, or developed a mouse model, or there's all kinds of things they might have done. Okay? So that's the kind of connective stuff that we want to make. And of course, this is a scientist-focused model, but you can think about the connection between all those other things, because the funder wants to know, what events did I sponsor, and what data sets did I produce, was I responsible for, and all of that. So I'm not going to show all the connections here because it gets complicated. Okay, so schematic. Okay. But in Vivo, this is just a little tiny piece of our data model, and the blue in the middle is the person. Okay? And the person is connected to events and concepts and contact information and a photo and organizations and works. Okay? And so it's a data model, and it has all of that stuff, and we can connect people to all of those different kinds of things when there's identifiers and when there's some data about scholarship available. This is a model from the Serif project in Europe, and they have they're not person-focused, they're funding-focused. So it's pretty much the same items of scholarship, but rearranged into different things. So what they put in the middle is the project. Okay? And the project has money, and the project has people associated with it. The project has a funding organization. And so they've been modeling this thing for 30 years, and so they have a kind of refined idea about what the things are that participate on the funding side of research. So getting these models, aligning things and making sure that we can exchange information and that our expectations are good, and we can get data and kind of build on-ramps to our highway system here. That's sort of the work I'm involved with. And the third thing that we need is a community. Okay? So we need help. Everybody needs to pitch in here. So this is part of the conversation that we're having. How does this thing emerge? How do we become better at understanding how scholarship works, and to understand scholarship, data, and to have data, community. So we need identifiers. We need some kind of commonality of understanding about how the data, what kind of data we're going to have, and then we need people who are working on it. I'm in an open source project, Vivo, and we have a community of we're about 140 universities around the world. We have a conference every year. We have work groups. We collaborate with many of the groups that have already been mentioned here. And so there are people who are working on this. always use more thought and more input and more clear thinking and elbow grease. These are some of the people that we work with. ORCID right at the top, and the digital science folks that are here, and the NIH Clinical and Translational Science Award Consortium, UC Publishers, CASR, who we already talked about. So there are a large number of different organizations that have different perspectives on the overall problem, who are working together in various ways to help understand, to provide data, to refine our ability to use it for the purpose of understanding how collaboration and team science and scholarship works. I want to make this point about ScienceCB in particular at the bottom there. That's a federal program here in the U.S. to create a new biosketch system for the NIH, and they're working with Vivo on data models so that the information that they're collecting about scientists and the information that we know can be represented in the open landscape are aligned, so that we'll have bidirectionality when they collect information about researchers. It'll flow into the ecosystem and vice versa. And maybe someday researchers won't have to fill out a federal biosketch because they already have one. Okay, and the data can just flow. Okay, so a nice example of collaboration there. And finally, I just want to invite anybody who's interested to the Vivo conference in Denver, August 17, 19, where we pick up this kind of conversation and continue the work to create data infrastructure and assemble information about science. Thank you.